Memory difficulties are one of the most common and most persisting difficulties that people experience after they've had a stroke. Most people who've had a stroke will have memory difficulties that are either for verbal material or for visual material, depending on where their stroke occurred. There's also a number of factors that can make memory difficulties worse. So for example, if your attention is having problems, it'll affect your memory. So if you're in a very busy shopping mall, that will detract from attention, which will affect your memory. Other factors such as having a poor diet, lack of sleep, lack of exercise, being stressed or anxious or worried will all have a negative impact on your memory, as would having a low mood such as depression. They will all affect your memory negatively. But there's a number of ways that you can compensate for having memory problems. Unfortunately, we don't have a way to give somebody back their memory once they've had a stroke or a brain injury, but you can learn ways to compensate for that. For example, one of the most common things people have difficulty remembering is to take their medication or to remember whether they've already taken it. The easiest way to fix that or solve that is to speak to your pharmacist about different types of blister packs that are available to help you to check, well, what medications am I meant to take when, and have I already taken that dose? So that's one way of compensating for a specific problem. The most evidence we have in terms of a more general way to help with memory is the use of a diary. So for example, some people will use an electronic diary. I myself use one of those big, huge paper diaries to help me to remember appointments, to remember people's names, and to remember telephone numbers. The important thing is that when you use a diary, you have to find one that works best for you. And people who have memory problems after a stroke will often use a diary in a different way to what somebody would usually. So for example, instead of just writing down appointments that I might have, I would also, let's say I had physiotherapy on Thursday, I'd have my appointment in my diary, and at the appointment I'd actually get my physiotherapist to write down what we did. So in that way, a diary can act to remind you of things you have to do, but it can also remind you of things that have already occurred. So if somebody comes to visit you, they can write it in the diary and remind you what you did and what you talked about. So in that way, you can use a diary differently to improve your memory. The other thing that's really important for improving memory or coping better with memory difficulties is having systems and organization in place. I often remember everything in its place and a place for everything. One of the common things everybody forgets is where they've put their keys. But if you have a hook beside the door that you always place your keys on, and you get yourself in a habit of putting them in that certain place, you're less likely to lose them. You can use other sorts of organizations and systems as well. For example, having a daily routine in the morning. First you get up, then you get dressed, then you brush your teeth, then you take your medication. By getting into habits and using organizational systems, you can really improve your level of independence if you've got a memory problem. The other main thing to remember is to ask for help and to let people know that you do have a memory problem. Get people to write things down in your diary. If you have difficulty remembering people's faces and names, ask if you can have a picture of them with their name written underneath and have a place in your diary where you keep all of those. So it's about figuring out what are you having difficulties with and then getting help and compensating for those specific difficulties.